Hello. In this very short video, I'm going to explain the concept of investment multiplier. Now, before going to explain what do we mean by investment multiplier, let me show you this diagram uh, that is basically aggregate demand and aggregate supply model without the long run aggregate supply curve. So we have aggregate demand AD1 and AS1, and then you can see the equilibrium real GDP is, let's say, $800 billion. Now, suppose if investment increases, maybe not because of this price index, GDP deflator, maybe because of positive business expectation. So investors are pretty confident about the economic situation in the country, and they now intend to invest more. You know that aggregate demand curve is the uh, summation of all these four expenditures: consumption expenditures, investment expenditures I, government expenditures, and net exports. So investment suppose increases by $10 billion. So I just wrote $10 billion next to investment. So if investment increases by $10 billion at each price level, not at any specific price, because if it is at one specific price, then we will be moving along the same demand curve. So now we are shifting aggregate demand to the right. So aggregate demand is increasing at each price level. Let's consider price P1. Notice that at price P1, the equilibrium GDP was $100 billion. When we increase $10 billion to aggregate demand, then aggregate demand shift to the right. But notice the gap between these two demand is not 10 billion. Initially, investment increases by 10 billion. So I'm assuming that AD should also shift by the same amount, 10 billion. But notice on the horizontal axis, when I increase investment by 10 billion, aggregate demand curve is actually shifting by 25 billion. That is from 800 to 825. Why this is so? Why aggregate demand or real GDP is increasing more than $10 billion? And if you see that 25 is nothing but 2.5 times 10. So it means it's a 2.5 multiple of 10 billion, 10 times 2.5. This is what we call multiplier effect. That is, when investment increases by 10 billion, aggregate demand will increase by multiplier. That is, by multiple of 2.5 times. Now, where does this 2.5 come from? So let's discuss this in more detail. So now I'll discuss using that diagram that suppose aggregate demand is increasing by $10 billion due to increase in investment. So first, investors increase their investment by $10 billion. That is first step. Assume the value of marginal propensity to consume, MPC, equal to change in consumption divided by change in income equals 0.6. What is marginal propensity to consume? By marginal propensity to consume, I mean that if your income increases by $1, you are going to spend 60 cents, that is 0.6, on consumption goods and services, consumer goods and services, sorry, and you save 0.4, that is 40 cents. So that is the ratio. So for example, if the value of marginal propensity to consume is 0.6, and if I receive additional 100 income, then out of that $100, I will spend buying consumer goods and services, or buying goods and services, any goods and services, $60 I spent and $40 I save. If my income increases by $1,000, then I will spend $600. That is 0.6 or 60%. So I'm assuming that marginal propensity to consume is 0.6, that is 60%. Now, aggregate demand increases by 10 billion initially. So initially, investors spend $10 billion. When are they going to spend that $10 billion? Of course, buying goods and services. For example, if investors borrow money, let's say an investor borrows money from the bank, let's say $10 billion, which is not possible, but let's say, and then this investor, let's say, buying machinery, equipment. Of course, those who are selling those machineries and equipments, they are receiving this $10 billion as their income. And they're also eating food, they're also paying for shelter, they're also consuming, buying consumer goods and services. So this $10 billion is someone else's income in the country. And that $10 billion, not complete 10 billion, but 60% of $10 billion will again be spent buying goods and services. So 60% of $10 billion is $6 billion. So this increase in investment, initial investment, will increase income by 10 billion and consumption by $6 billion only. So initially, increase in $10 billion investment will increase income by $10 billion for someone else. And then that 10 billion increase in income will increase consumption by $60 billion. But remember, when these people are going to spend $6 billion buying goods and services, that $6 billion will also be income for someone else. And those people will keep 40% and spend 60% of that income. So the 60% of $6 billion is $3.6 billion. So this is second round. Then it will continue. So every time this expenditure will become income of someone else, and that person will spend 60% of whatever he or she receives. So this process will continue. This is basically an infinite sequence. But using mathematics, which is beyond the jurisdiction, at least at this stage, we'll discuss in another video, we can add this infinite series. And the formula to calculate this infinite series of, so let's see this, what is happening. So initially, when investment increases by 10 billion, aggregate demand will increase by 10 billion. Then in the second round, aggregate demand will increase by 6 billion, then 3.6 billion, then 60% of 3.6 billion, and 60%, 60%. So it is decreasing, but it's an infinite series. It will never be equal to zero. So if we add all these numbers, we get, I know, $825. How do I know? Basically not 825, $25 or $1 billion. How do I know? This is the rule. So initial increase was $10 billion. I did not write billion, $10 billion. And then I multiply by this expression, 1, always 1, divided by 1, always 1, minus the value of MPC, that is 0.6. So if you calculate this 1 over 1 minus 0.6, that is 1 over 0.4, you will get 2.5. This 2.5, this is the value of the multiplier. So whenever your investment increases by any number, total aggregate demand will increase 2.5 times that number. So initially investment increases by 10 billion. So 2.5 times 10 is 25 billion. So if you see here in this diagram now, when investment increases by 10 billion, then aggregate demand will shift to the right, not by 10 billion, but by 25 billion, because 800 and 825. So the gap is 25 billion. So this is the concept of multiplier, investment multiplier. Similarly, we have government multiplier as well, tax multiplier as well. Multiplier simply means that when government increases expenditure by just $1 million, the impact will be more than $1 million, because there's a series of changes. That is, that $1 million will be someone else's income, that those people will also, those who receive this money will spend, and that will continue. So we have methods to calculate this total impact. Notice one thing, that 825 in this diagram is not equilibrium. Equilibrium is 815. So why? When I know that aggregate demand shifts by $25 billion, why the new equilibrium is only 815? Why not 825? This is because, notice, at P1 price, the supply, AS supply curve is $800 billion. So producers are producing $800 billion worth of goods and services. The buyers, that is consumers, government, investors, foreigners, they are demanding $825 billion worth of goods and services. Whereas the country is producing only 800. They can't produce more. What are they going to do? If demand is more than supply, what are they going to do? They'll simply charge higher prices. So price index will start increasing. When price increases, you know what would happen. These suppliers in the country, now they can earn more money. Why? Because prices are going up. So they tend to produce more. And therefore, you move on the same aggregate supply curve in this direction. So you are moving in this direction. And similarly, since price is increasing, so consumers might not buy because of the increase in price. So their demand will decrease in this direction, right? In this direction. So these 2 points will eventually move to this new equilibrium. So aggregate demand will decrease because of increase in price. Aggregate supply will increase because of increase in price. And eventually the equilibrium is reached at 815. So the multiplier effect does work here, moving aggregate demand to 825. But why not this country is producing $815 billion worth of goods and services? Why not 825? This is simply because of the increase in price level. So price increase in price will decrease the production, the demand basically. And when there's less demand, of course, there's less production. They're not going to produce more than the demand. So they both will move towards a new equilibrium, that is 850. So that's all as far as the concept of multiply is concerned. Thank you.